Hey everybody, it's me, Root Beer, and I just got back from doing a constructed cup for Divine Z Set 2, so I figured I'd do a little deck profile and talk about my games. So, I actually did win 3-0 and got this really nice playmat. Ooh, ah. I don't normally win things like this, so this is a new experience for me. And, I played Liael for set two. If you saw the Twitter video I put up the other day where I opened a bunch of sneak peek packs that I found, then you'll know I was already thinking about this deck for this event. So, let's get into the deck profile real quick, and then I'll talk about my games. So, these are not in any particular order, they're just in like whatever order the cards currently are in my deck. Normally I would go from like least to most important, but this isn't like the most in-depth deck profile. I might do like a follow-up discussion video later where I go more into it, but we played four of Biscotti, so this is the Cycler card from set one, the one where you can like Counterblast or Energy Blast to draw a card when it's discarded. Uh, this deck doesn't use energy at all, so the Energy Blast 3 is just free. It came up a handful of times where I used it early a lot, and also like times I use it for the guard effect as well. Sometimes I also used it for the guard effect. There we go. Next up, we have 4 copy of Tail Faith. So this is part of the Keter package, right? Where you have like your orders, and then you have Tell Faith, where if you play the order, you can search top 5, and she gets plus 10,000 if you have 4 or more units. So I thought back and forth a lot about what cards I wanted to play in the deck, and I ultimately just came to the conclusion that Tell Faith was correct. Like, I think because the deck doesn't gain the most advantage, you do just kind of need the package, and then the extra 10,000 is helpful, especially because, like, the way Liael plays, where you have to bind your units and kind of time leap, in quotes, all of your units, then, like, you need to set up something in the bind zone before a lot of her dedicated support gains power. And so, Tell Faith, where you just have 4 units to become, like, a 20k beater, is very nice. Speaking of things you need to bind first, I have 4 copies of, I don't actually know this guy's name, Sword Saint of Itinerant Idris. So this is one where, like, if you have the same name as it in the bind zone, it gets plus 10,000, and when it's bound by the ability of your Liael, you can Soul Blast 1 to draw a card and give your Vanguard plus 5k. So we are playing it for the power boost, and the draw is occasionally helpful. Plus, because of Liael's divine skill, you can also be in a situation where you do need to, like, Soul Blast a copy in your soul, so it's in the drop zone to set up your divine skill. We also have our 3 Persona rides. I'm also playing a fourth one with the Grail. So the reason why the Grail is appealing for this deck is because of Liel's other ability, which is like when it's placed on the guard circle, you can discard a card and put back 2 bound cards for it to be a PG for faded units. So that is something that comes up occasionally. It actually happened in one of my games. We'll talk about that in a bit. Next up, we have 4 of the grade 1, Magic of Stimulants, Euphoria. So this is kind of the stock grade 1 that all of the faded ones got, where it's like, okay, if you have the grade 3 faded one that it's associated with, it gets 5k, and then it has another ability. In this case, you can Soul Blast 1, choose a card with the same name as any of your units from the drop zone, put it on the bottom of your deck, choose one of your units, it gets power plus 5,000. So another way to kind of get extra copies of Liel out of the soul and then set up for your divine skill, but also just an okay way of gaining power. There are some situations with like Telfaith or Idif I still don't know this guy's name. Idit Idyrus, whatever, this guy, where, maybe you want to save the booster or you don't have a booster, so the extra 5k, just getting it over that hump to 35 is pretty nice on your Persona ride turns, especially if you are going for the kill. But mainly, just like getting extra copies of Liel out of the soul to set up for the divine skill is what I use it for. Next up, we have two copies of Gragaon. So, new card in set 2, if your unit was placed by the ability of your Vanguard with the Divine skill, so this also works for Reziel. It gets red text at the end of the battle it boosted, you can retire it to countercharge 1 and power plus 5000. So, this is a form of countercharging for the deck. It doesn't go through that much counterblast, all things considered. Like, the one thing is usually just Liael's skill, and then, like, maybe if you wanted to counterblast for Biscotti's ability instead of energy blasting, but again, energy is just free, so why would you do that? But, during the Divine skill, you can use more than one counterblast in a turn, or if a game just goes really long, you might end up running out at some point, so a little bit of countercharging is nice. Plus, we are playing the package, which I will elaborate on more now as we get into it. So, Sergalon, sorry to all the people who cannot afford Sergalons, but this card is just really hard to replace. I mean, I am also playing Telfaith, which is also very expensive. I just happen to already have it. So, yeah. Uh, One of the problems I was having with this deck is just hand size. Like, in Engine, the only thing that draws is this, and you have to Soul Blast for it, and you already go through your soul a decent amount just by the deck existing. So, Euphoria can use one, this can use one, the grade 1 of your ride line uses one, so you can run out of soul very quickly to like draw a card. So having Sarah on to just kind of search top 2 for anything is nice. And also, the nature of Liel means that you are going to be shuffling a decent amount, so you can kind of recirculate any triggers you see off of Sarah back into the deck. Uh, Next up, we have 4 copies of Wisdom of Beginning that cleared the world. So, the last part of the package, it is a grade 2 order where you counterblast 1, draw 2, choose 2 cards from your hand, call them to rearguard circle if they're grade equal or less than your Vanguard, and discard them if they aren't. So, this kind of completes the package where this is an order that lets you draw 2 and then call 2, so it triggers Telfaith. It also triggers Sergalon if you're in a situation where your opponent has more rear guards than you. Like I said, the deck doesn't really counterblast that much except for Liael's ability, so you do have the counter charge available to you. It's a way for you to get early pressure, as well as a way to just like dig through your deck and gain advantage, because again, you only really have the one card that draws, and it's using a resource that you already kind of use a lot of, so like, I kind of went back and forth about like different things. I also thought about maybe using Warrior's Rest, the one that gives like 2 things 10k when they're boosted, and then also lets you draw a card. That one costs an energy, which again, energy is not a resource you're really using, but after a lot of testing, it's like a little awkward with Tailfaith because you can't trigger her like call ability. So at the end of the day, just kind of the standard package of Wisdom, Sergalon, and Tailfaith is just what I settled on because it was just the most effective package and makes up for some of the problems that the deck had, which is like needing to dig deeper, particularly when I was doing test hands. I kept not finding persona rides, which is what ultimately turned me back onto this engine. And admittedly, during my games, I did see it a lot. We will elaborate more in a little bit. So, next, we have our trigger lineup. So, I'm playing 7 crits. 1, 2, 3, 4 draws, 4 heals, the red over triggers, and of course the 3 PGs, with one of them being Sanctitude. So I ultimately landed on 4 draws instead of like 3, 8. Again, because like I felt hand size was a problem. I just wanted to be able to dig for pieces more, hence playing more draw triggers. The one thing is that like now that Blankmeyer is a thing and you're gonna have to contend with like a guard restrict, maybe you want to swap for like 8 crits simply to increase your overall shield value available, but mm, at the end of the day, it is what it is. So red OT was just kind of what I had available. Like, I think you could reasonably argue for any of them. Like, the blue OT being an oversized crit trigger and getting back something from the drop zone is, like, always helpful. This kind of gives you more attacks, kind of helps you leverage, like your extra drive checks and the potential to make like 6 attacks in one turn thing. It is just like a generally pretty good over trigger. Also, like Liael, although it is a restander on the divine skill, doesn't really get like a big guard restrict or anything that would like really benefit from seeing the blue OT. So I just went with the red one, and also I'm lazy and didn't feel like unsleeving the blue OT. But yeah, that's the deck list. So, like I said at the beginning of this video, I did play a constructed cup. It was 8 people, and I went 3-0 with this deck. So, my first game I played against Blangmeyer. I won the die roll and chose to go first. That was pretty much my expectation going into it, was that, like, I have to win the die roll and go first, just because like Blankmeyer's ability being able to bind 2 cards is really annoying, and it means trying to use the package early can be a bit risky, because then they can snipe it. That's now fewer targets for you to bind and call with Liael, and you're losing a lot of advantage early when you're not really set up yet. And so, of course, the trade-off for like not aggroing early is that you kind of give the Blankmeyer player time to build up. So I really wanted to go first, mostly just to be able to like use the package to aggro early and kind of get the early advantage, which I did do against my first round opponent. And then the deck decided that it didn't want to work anymore. I just like could not draw a Persona ride all game. So I damaged one of them. Then on the divine skill turn, it was like their last attack, and I had that excuse me, I had that inkling in the back of my head of like, okay, I'm going to damage Liel right now, aren't I? Like I need the Persona ride, and then of course I did. And then, yeah, so even though I got like a really early advantage and dealt like 4 damage really quickly, it just kind of tapered off because I was never able to Persona Ride and get those like big numbers and really start building up pressure and advantage. Also meant I couldn't use the Divine skill because I didn't have any Liels in the drop zone. Funny enough, I did end up winning the game because my opponent decked out. They kind of overextended a bit with all the like drawing and soul charging that Blankmeyer can do. So because they just never quite got enough pressure going, they didn't see enough triggers to be able to really finish the game. I was able to just kind of survive until deck out. So that was less a case of me winning and more my opponent losing. Round 2, I played against Vergila, so that's the ride line from the Skyride manga, the like rare Dragon Empire guy, which it's cool that we got him. So my opponent did make a little minor misplay early. They forgot to reveal the grade 3 to get the crit on the grade 2. Uh in the grand scheme, I don't think it changes anything. Like I took 2 damage that turn anyways, and so like in that situation, I think what would have happened is like I would have taken the same 2 damage, he wouldn't have gotten a trigger, and then I would have just like guarded the other attack to kind of keep pressure off. And then I think the rest of the game more or less plays out the same. By the end of the game, I still had like 3, 4 triggers in my hand, so that extra guard early I don't think really changes anything long term. And so yeah, my deck actually worked that time, so we had a nice little back and forth. They were using the Vergila and then the grade 2 Cycler card from set 9, the one that's like Soul Blast 1, you can retire something, and then your opponent binds 3 normal units from their drop zone. So he just did that like over and over and over again, trying to snipe the Liel in my drop zone to get me off the Divine skill. Unfortunately, I had a second copy in my hand alongside the Grail, which is the use case for why I'm playing the Grail in the first place, is in case I needed to use Liel's effect and still want to Persona Ride afterwards, so that did come up. So on his last attack, I PG'd with the Liel effect, and then Persona Ride with the Grail, and finished it up with the Divine skill. Third game, I played against another Blangmeyer, so my opponent didn't really draw into any of their Persona rides. We had a nice little back and forth early. He called some cards to be aggressive. I called cards to be aggressive. You know, I got the package, so I did the like Telfaith plus Sarah Gallon, and then Telfaith found Gragaon, which meant I didn't really end up doing like a full board. It was still only 2 attacks, but it still worked out. He gave me just enough damage to kind of operate. So he gave me 2 damage early, gave me another one, tried to attack the Telfaith, I guarded it, and then as the game dragged on, my opponent just didn't find their Persona rides. The game was still, like, very close. Blankmeyer can just get really, really big, so I think what it came down to was, like, 4 cards in hand, he attacked with Blankmeyer, I had already gotten past the Divine skill, both of us had used it at this point, didn't see a trigger. He saw like multiple PGs across like various drive checks. Didn't see very many triggers. So yeah, it was like PG PG. I survived that. Persona rode with the Grail and then like cleaned up the game. There was a very funny moment where I had to call like Blade Feather Dragon to the back row because I had actually run out of names like because Blankmeyer keeps doing the like bind 2 every turn, and I didn't see any of my grade 1s earlier, what happened was like I kept having to call my grade 2s and they would just keep getting bound. So like I was like going and going and going, and then of course Liael also has to bind them, so I just like burned through all 8 copies of these two. So by the end of the game, it's like I had to call Blade Feather Dragon because I knew there was still one in my deck, so I could time leap it with Liael, which was a very funny moment, and could have feasibly won the game. I did actually check a trigger during that turn, so it could swing for 24, but my opponent had just enough guard to survive that, which was very funny. And then the thing I said happened where they swung without Divine Skill because they had already used it, didn't get a trigger. I damaged the trigger, which gave me just enough power to survive their turn, and then cleaned it up the turn after. So yeah, I went 3-0. That was a pretty nice day, and overall, Liel is an okay deck. Like, it's fine. It's something you play for fun. Like, on a larger competitive scale, I feel like even the Blankmeyer matchups, which I played a lot, were kind of a losing matchup. I feel like if my opponent was able to, like, Persona Ride and get those better numbers, that probably would have changed things a lot. And then same thing with the first game where my opponent was completely ahead of me, but then they decked out. So it really did feel like my opponents lost the matchups more than I won. And overall, the deck is just okay, but that's gonna be it for this video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.